Watch out, Ziggy. So we have had a frost this last week. We had a 32 night and we had like 27 and 25. So I wanted to show you what held up best in our garden. So even though we have frost hardy plants, frost hardy just means the frost isn't going to kill it, but a frost can still damage it, especially a hard frost down in the 28s. So let me show you what we got. And I'm really going to talk about the varieties of what we have, because the varieties seem to make a big difference. So like we have 3 different kinds of broccoli varieties, and certain ones did better than others. Let me show you what that does. So here's dinosaur kale, completely unharmed. I found that like this crinkly Savoy type of leaf really holds up well. Now you can see here, this is a cauliflower, and you can see she has a lot of damage. This is the Snowball Improved. This is an F1 hybrid, and it's self-blanching. So if you can see in there, it's starting to head, and these are kind of like curling up over it. It protects the flower, protects the head, makes the cauliflower nicer. So these ones actually did not fare quite as well. Where this one, the Snow Crown, and it did much better. So you can see, and it was over here in the front too. So things that are in the front typically get hit a little harder than things that are in the middle, just because they have a little bit of windbreak from the other plants around them. But you can see she's got on her bottom leaves, probably these leaves were already weakened. We got a little bit of damage, but all of this in the middle is looking really great. You can see she's starting to blanch too, or starting to crown too. And then we have pak choi. Now this was under the canopy of some of these things that got damaged, so that's probably why it saved it. But the pak choi is doing really good. Of course, onions and spinach are doing well. This chard looks really sad. That's because we've been eating on it. Same thing with this Swiss chard, the rainbow chard. It did really, really well in the frost. We've been eating on it though. That's why it looks like there's only a little bit left. And these little sprouts, this is actually vetch. Vetch is commonly used as a cover crop. It's a legume, so it will like pod. But it fixes nitrogen from the air, and if you terminate it at the right time before it pods, so cover crops, it's kind of a whole thing to get into, but they all have to be terminated at the correct time. So vetch needs to be allowed to flower, then you terminate it before it pods, and it will have little nodules on the root system because it fixed the nitrogen from the air, stored it in the roots. Then when you cut it down, it never used that nitrogen. So as the roots break down, the carbon from it breaks down, that nitrogen is released into the soil. And we cover cropped in here kind of by accident, but it turned out to be a really good thing because broccoli and cauliflower are all really heavy feeders. So my next year's planting, I'm not going to really amend at all except with some homemade compost. And so that is that's good for all of this. It's going to help replenish all that nitrogen, because these plants need to get as big as possible, as quickly as possible, to make a big flower. The bigger your plant, the bigger your flower. It's how you get a bigger broccoli compared to, a little one. So, and same thing with a lot of the leafy greens that are grown. Same thing with cabbage, like dinosaur kale. You want a lot of nitrogen. Your lettuce, your pak choi, all things like that. Leafy greens, you want them nice and large, so you tend to amend with more nitrogen, or I amend with more nitrogen for the fall, depending on when you grow these crops. You might be somewhere in the north that grows them in the summer. But down here in the south, we grow them through fall and winter. So let me show you what other varieties we have and what held up the best. So you can see this back here is a Brussels sprout. I'm not sure if it realized that it frosted. It has 0 damage and actually seems to be happier and doing better since the frost. We had a couple 80-degree days and it was really sad, but it actually appreciated the frost quite a bit. And you can see it's starting to make little tiny baby Brussels sprouts. I'm excited. I only did a couple Brussels sprouts because they take like something crazy, like 120 days or something. They take a really long time, so I didn't want it to hold up too much garden space. Once again, these are all snow crown. That's why they look really good. And then in here is our rutabaga. Here, that's a basil that we ripped out. Rutabaga. That one's a little behind. You can see here rutabaga. And this is what the rutabaga leaves are. These ones here. See down here. And these ones even in the front. This one has a little bit of damage here. All that in there looks really good. Rutabagas get really, really sweet when it frosts. They are frost hardy. And they really do get better with a frost. And of course, we've got lettuce. This one and this one. I had a pak choi right here, and this one got shaded out. But now that that's gone, it'll pick up. This one and this one are just the mix from the M.I. Gardener salad mix. We've really liked it. It's been our favorite. We also have a Merlot lettuce. I'll show you down farther down. And then way back in here is celeriac. So it's not celery, it's celeriac. We grow it for the root. It did really well. Of course it was, kind of undercover, but it did really well, and it seems to actually appreciate the frost, kind of like the Brussels sprout. And you can see these in the front. These are snowball. They got hurt pretty bad. This is another snowball. You can see the damage on that. And we get to the broccoli. So let me walk back over here, because here's the one I really wanted to show. This one got the most damage, even though it's really big, and you can see it's getting new leaves and recovering. But this is a Desico. You can see even the head. See if I can make you see that. Even the head got a tiny bit of frost damage, but the leaves got the most frost damage. This was the one hurt the most by the frost. So I'm gonna have to come through here and probably clean a lot of these up. What happens when it gets hit by frost, and the reason why you want to take them out, is because these spots are no longer photosynthesizing for the plant. So if a full leaf is not photosynthesizing, you want to take it off, and you want leaves like this. And it will grow these leaves up here quicker if it doesn't have enough of these. Now you don't want to take all the leaves off, because the plant will die. But if you take the ones that are hurt the worst, because if it's not photosynthesizing, it's not creating carbohydrates, it's not feeding the soil, therefore the soil cannot feed the plant. But it seems like, you can see the bottom here, leaves on the bottom under here it was just the ones really sticking out, but these are the ones that just had frost just hanging on them. And I'll put a picture up on the screen so you can see what the garden looked like with the frost. Like everything was just drooping and hanging with frost. So one thing about this frost, I did not use frost fabric. You can see we have hoops. I did not use frost fabric though, and we did not water. So before you have a frost, if you just water the garden really well, it's always helpful, because what it basically does is it takes the cells of the plant, the cell structure of the plant, and it bursts them, because they freeze, so they burst. Now of course frost hardy plants lean towards not doing that. That's why their leaves are kind of like, I don't say waxy, but they feel a little different, like the brassicas and things. But still their leaves can burst, especially the weaker lower ones. So if you water them really well and all the cells are filled with water, it keeps them from bursting. Now, not frost tender plants, but your frost hardy plants. Another thing you can do is, when the frost is out here still on your plant, if you can get to your garden before the sun does, and basically like de-thaw it with cold water, like pour cold water on your plants and get the frost off that way, it's a lot better than letting the sun hit them, because it's just a little letting the sun hit it just causes it like a little more of a drastic change. Ignore my puppy dogs. The sun hitting it causes more of a drastic change than you pouring cold water on it and slowly thawing it. Now, this one is our Fiesta. This is a hybrid. And you can see it grows like straight up. A lot of broccoli doesn't. A lot of broccoli will kind of like fall on its, create a little elbow. Let's see if I can show you an example of one. Kind of like this. Kind of falls, gets that little elbow to help support itself. It comes up. Nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of the growth of the more heirloomy growth habit. This broccoli, however, is a Fiesta broccoli from Urban Farmer. Really, really like it. You can see it's got a nice big tight head, and that's saying something because our days, like I said, we were in the 80s and all of a sudden we got a frost and now we're back up in like high 70s. But this got very little damage and a little bit, and I think we went ahead, we already took some of the leaves off, but it has recovered the quickest. So yeah, this is a Fiesta also. See some of that damage? Not bad though. Not bad. So Fiesta broccoli tends to prefer warmer days and cooler nights, which is kind of how the South works. We have, even in fall and winter, we can have warm days. But, so I didn't want something that was going to bolt on me just because, you know, I have a couple days that are in the 80s, but the rest of our days are going to be in the 60s. So it does prefer the warmer days and the cooler nights, which is great, but I wasn't sure how it was going to handle the frost, but it seemed to do really well. I only have one last broccoli to show you, and then we'll go to our cabbages. And this was, I think this is my favorite broccoli. This one definitely did the best out of all of them, but I guess I really can't be surprised. So this is Waltham. Waltham broccoli is known for its frost hardiness. It's pretty heirloomy. They're all a little later to head, as you can see, but they have pretty much zero damage whatsoever. And I will say, some of they were harder to undersow because their leaves are bigger, but I really like this variety. This is a really awesome one. The heads are really nice and tight, and a lot of times with like heirloomy ones, like especially like purple sprouting broccoli, the head will be smaller. I have not really, it's not supposed to be that way with Waltham. I haven't grown it before. And to be honest, they're not that far behind the other ones, some of my hybrid ones that are like 45 days. So when it comes to succession sowing, I prefer to succession sow almost kind of like with my varieties. So I'll pick a short day variety, and then I'll pick like a 45 day and then like a 60 day, and then there's some that are like 80 days. And that's how I prefer to succession sow, because just for the phase of life that we're in, it's easier for me to get all the soil blocks made, get all the seeds started, get them all ready, take care of them all at the same time, and get the garden all, for the most part, out within a couple weeks of each other. Like, I can't get the whole thing done, but get the majority of the garden out within a week or two of each other. That's how I like to succession sow. But having to consistently make soil blocks every week and sow seeds every week and write dates on everything, that's difficult for me, especially because my little children like to move little sticks, and I try and write like with a paint marker on the item, but even still things get moved around and they just kind of do. And then they always want to help plant. So when we come out here, they're trying to hand you things quick and you're trying to go, wait, hang on, we don't need those kind yet. So things tend to get messed up, but I like to succession sow with varieties. Also, when I do that with varieties, I can better see what grows best when, and I always have one date I have to remember of when these were planted, and that's just helpful to me. So that's how I like to succession sow. It's just easier for me to manage in this phase of life that we're in. And of course, most of our perennial herbs are frost hardy: thyme, rosemary, oregano, sage, comfrey, chives, all those wonderful things, echinacea. And then we have cilantro in here with these onions. And cilantro is not necessarily frost hardy, but it does prefer the cold. So I'm actually surprised. I thought I was gonna kill on me, but it didn't. It did really well. And of course, onions. These are walking onions. That's why they're a little floppy. But our walking onions have been wonderful. One thing I've realized about walking onions is they're not an onion you really store. You just come out here and use them fresh as you need them. But walking onions are super hardy. Same thing with strawberries. I call these my kudzu strawberries because they just kind of took over this space. And we are actually, I'm excited to share this, we are going to make an entire strip of nothing but strawberries right there in front of that fig tree. So that's exciting. So all these will be moved next year. The asparagus is going to stay, but all of these are going to be moved next year. And they're going to have their own row. That way we can fertilize them better the way they need it and give them more acidic soil. Hopefully get a better berry crop. And then this is another cauliflower. This is a snowball. So the snowball improved. Now this is just like one that kind of accidentally got over here with the Waltham broccoli. But you can see it has zero damage. Granted, the broccoli is kind of taller and it's kind of in like this corner and it's kind of, you know, protected a little bit. But you can see it's starting to head too. See that twist? I'm excited. But even still, zero damage. So I really think this is a F1 hybrid. I can't save the seed from it, but I appreciate the frost hardiness of it. And we even have some of our radishes under here. They're doing okay. We pulled the radishes and ate them, but they didn't have any frost tender spots either. And then our peas. So these are snap peas and snow peas and English shelling peas. And what I did find was the pea plant themselves were just fine, but some of the leaves, or the flowers, I mean, the leaves were fine, but some of the flowers were damaged. And some of the very tiny peas, like the flower had just gotten pollinated and was starting to make its own pea, that part was damaged, so we couldn't eat them. We had to just pull them. But they have a new flush of flowers, and we'll have more peas soon. So here's our Savoy cabbage, held up really great, getting a nice head. And our Copenhagen, it's a little farther behind, but it's still looking good. This one had some bug damage at the beginning of the year, but it recovered just fine. You can see there's no frost damage on any of these. They are very, very hardy. And I think also being a little lower to the ground has helped them. This is our spinach and our green stalk. This is our Merlot lettuce, doing great. This is a noble spinach. Green onions. So another plant that loves the cold, and it loves cold. It can like handle cold up to like -20. Is chamomile. So actually I planted this in the spring, and it was really, really sad in our summer heat. A lot of them died, but this one made it, came back, and has been blooming like crazy for us. It smells really good. Some other flowers that are really frost hardy are calendula. It can handle a hard frost, and your snapdragons and your violas and pansies, Johnny jump ups, things like that. We have a lot of that planted out in the front. We try and plant as much as we can for the pollinators. They need things in winter just as much as they need things in summer. And where we live, like I said, like sometimes we're in the middle of winter and we'll all of a sudden have like a 70-degree day or an 80-degree day. And the bumblebees, the queens that overwinter, they'll come out and forage. And I think honeybees come out and forage a little bit too in really warm days like that. So having those flowers out for them is really important. And hoverflies also during the winter will come out and try and forage for things. So I know in the springtime everyone's really, really good about making sure they have flowers, but autumn is something we need to think about too. And most of our people who are gardening and have big gardens are not growing things that flower. I don't want my broccoli, my cabbage and cauliflower to flower. Or we grow a lot of leafy things like cabbage and kale and chard and collard greens. Oh, you know what? We have to go out front. I didn't show you guys the collard greens. They fared really well too. I'm gonna go do that real quick. Let me show you. So here are collard greens. They look really great. You can see we've been eating off of them. That's not what that is. We've been eating off of them for quite some time. My kids love collard greens. They say it tastes like a boiled peanut, which we just cook it. We take the rib out, cook it in some broth. I put a splash of Worcestershire, a little bit of salt and some butter. And that is that. And we will combine it with cabbage leaves and kale and all kinds of things like that. But the collard leaves are definitely their favorite. And of course you see we got our snapdragons in here with some broccoli. These are my favorite snapdragons. A friend gave these to me. These ones are kind of done. These are chantillies. They're really, really beautiful. I don't stake my snapdragons. They just fall all over the place, but they're okay. You can see there's flower farmers would die. The crooked stems, I don't mind though. They're standing straight up. They're okay. And this I forgot I wanted to show you. Mustard. So not mustard greens, but actual mustard, like kitchen mustard, seed mustard that you would use in like canning. So it blooms super frost hardy, more blooms for the pollinators in autumn and winter. And then you get these little pods that once the plant is done, you just take the whole plant, dry it, take the little pods, and you can just crush the pods and separate the seeds. You don't have to like shell it like you would like green peas or a bean or something. Something else that did really well was our yarrow and our feverfew. Feverfew seems to really like the cold. Feverfew does perennialize here, so I just think we don't get frozen and cold enough that it bothers it. But so I'm excited to have that for next year. And here's some more mustard, looking lovely. And last but not least, our fennel. Fennel perennializes here too. I have found though that I only grow this for the butterflies, swallowtails. This is their host plant. However, we don't really like to eat it, but we prefer Thai basil over fennel. And last but not least, violas, little Johnny jump ups. So these actually are edible. You can see these little guys. You can use them kind of like you press them and use them in baking. They're really frost hardy. They're wonderful, and they're just so lovely in a container because their root system does not need a lot of room. They stay nice and small, and I appreciate them. I really like them. And of course, you have all the snaps in the back. All the ones in this pot are getting ready to bloom. They're so pretty. But that is it for all our frost hardy things. Thank you guys so much for walking the garden with me. I always love having anyone who wants to come into my garden, and I love talking about it. So thank you so much for taking an interest, and I hope these varieties and seeing how they grow was helpful to you. Once again, we are gardening in South Carolina Zone 7B, and we will see you next time.